Last time, I had Joan Van De Greik on to talk about her husband's injury and the journey to get diagnosed. This week, Joan continues her story, highlighting the financial impact, how she worked to piece together income streams to recover from their debt, and her work with first responder families to financially protect themselves now and into retirement. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Code for Couples podcast.
Welcome to the Code for Couples podcast, focusing on topics for law enforcement officers and couples to keep you and your relationship connected, resilient, and Code 4. Now, your host, law enforcement expert Cyndi Doyle, author of Hold the Line and My Wife.
Hey there, and welcome back to Code for Couples. I am Cyndi Doyle, and today I have back on Joan Van De Greik as we finish out her story. If you had not listened to the podcast before this, you want to go back and listen to that one as well. But just as a brief introduction, Joan is a certified public accountant, a CPA, and the wife of a law enforcement officer who was injured in the line of duty that resulted in a traumatic brain injury. And in our previous podcast, we talk about the rollout of the injury, how it came about, the length of time that it took to get diagnosed and the impact on her, the relationship and the family, and how that was really, I just got goosebumps talking about that, and how it took so long to get that. And today, we're going to really focus on the financial aspect of things because this is where Joan excels and created her company, Fetch Your Wealth, out of her experience. So, Joan, thank you so much for coming back on. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to dive back into this topic.
Yes. Well, thank you. And thank you for having us back. I know we kind of derailed last time because I think the idea is mind-boggling, just how long sometimes it takes to get the care and just, especially with the brain injuries, how life is so different. And you're not necessarily married to your spouse anymore in a way that might be different from like when they started on the job. Right. And I know the job sometimes has that impact as well. I'm sure you guys talk, I know you talk at length about that part of it, but then there's this piece of it. And there's a very strange like transition hodgepodge thing happening where they're trying to find when they're like voluntold to retire, like, well, who are they? And then especially if you can't work again, it's like,
and there was a danger, right? I remember talking about, I don't want to go too far into that, but if I recall right, there was a danger potentially at the house too. So a lot changes.
And I will say a lot of things have gotten a lot better. We realized that he was having seizures and started on seizure medicine. And while he still has the episodes, we can talk him through, which is huge.
Wow.
Like you can actually have a conversation when he's in the middle of it. And it's night and day difference. Like he's not his old self by any means because he's having the episode, but like to be able to have that conversation that we couldn't have for like the last 8-9 years, it's like, okay, we had since we last spoke, we even had another incident, right? And it was like, okay, let me take care of it. You are going to stay here. I am going to go intervene and with what is it, getting to you without getting into details. And it was just huge because we could talk him through it. We could talk about what happened. He kind of remembered why he was mad and he was remembering what was happening, which
That's
before,
gross.
I mean, it was pure blackout. And, it's been a journey with all that. We still are kind of working through some things that happened last summer with all of it. But the fact that now at least we can have a conversation when he feels like he's getting to that point which is not something we had even last summer, is huge.
Yeah, it's such growth. When you see those, it kind of gives you that bright spot, I imagine. Let's talk about the financial piece. Yeah. So what were the expectations that you had once the injury was determined and he was potentially needing to leave?
I think it was kind of, and I hate to say it like this, it's almost like that romantic idea of like what the academy is going to be like. Coming from New York, we had so many first responders around us, right? There's like the brotherhood of FDNY, NYPD, and we had this imaginative thing that it was going to be just like that, right? And we had family that were in those roles, like I did, not him so much, but I did.
Okay.
He had close friends because he was a volunteer for years and worked for all those guys. And it was so close knit. And I'm not going to say it's not close knit, but what I observed as a difference is when push comes to shove and someone is hurt, I noticed way more one-on-one involvement, what I observed with friends back there. And that one-on-one involvement includes finances, right?
Okay.
It includes the idea of advocating for like their workers' comp and supporting them through the process. And whereas, and coming through the academy, we just assumed that would be like that here. And I think a little bit of it's just the nature of where we live.
Okay.
We live in Colorado, but we had this idea that it would be the same. We just figured like brotherhood is brotherhood. And it's not that they don't have their back. I mean, absolutely. These guys have everybody's back. But there's something different at the management level where it's very adversarial. And I'm saying not necessarily your sergeant. I'm talking above, right? It's very adversarial. And what our experience was that it was almost like you have to be faking this. And that theme played throughout the years where, at one point, we thought financially we were going to be in good shape because we figured, okay, if something happens, you day one of the academy, right? What do? You sign up for all the life insurance academy offers. You get some free stuff from the city. You get all those supplemental policies, and you probably have workers' comp. So if you get hurt, you're taken care of.
Yeah.
And the reality was when all that happened was, one, we didn't realize he was hurt.
Right.
The way he was hurt.
Right.
That was, remember going back, there was a huge time lapse. We didn't really even start to observe that we think he was like, that this change wasn't just fatigue for like 5 months. And then it was another probably 4-ish months. I remember like from April and then it was around December where we actually said, hey, workers' comp, we think we need to have you guys relook at him because weird stuff happening here. And they were like, oh, no. Oh, no. He just needs to, he works overnights. Like he just needs to rest more and drink more water. I can
remember
tell you
that. Yeah.
And I've said that name to others here locally and they're like, oh yeah, we know who that is. There's a few of those here. It's also a small community. We're a small city here. But the point being was, then we start with the lawsuits and things like that. And in the meantime, in order to get him care, luckily, we had good health care. That's the one good thing about anytime you're with law enforcement. You have great health care. We had to, though, pay all those copays. And see, the thing is that we're not just talking about like an x-ray and a sprain wrist kind of copay. We're talking MRIs. We're talking multiple MRIs.
Right.
We're talking examinations that are generally need pre-authorization and are very little covered by the insurance. So yes, it's covered. We're getting the insurance rate. We're still coming up with huge amounts of copays. You're maximizing your deductible every year on this particular person.
Yeah, right.
And then you're going through the rounds of like medications and literally like they're just tossing medicines at him. They first start with the stuff from like the 60s and 70s, like that's the cheapest. And they're just tossing and like, oh, that didn't work. Okay, well, we'll try a new one. And it's like, one, it's fatiguing. It's absolutely exhausting because you're playing with chemicals in the body. It's not getting anywhere. You're constantly picking up meds at the pharmacy and paying copays in hopes that, well, maybe this will be the one that will work. And like literally you get to the point where like, if you have a 40% chance, it's worth taking.
Sure.
But you go through this all while you're trying to figure out, well, okay, I need to get now an attorney involved because, and a lot of them work on rates, but I have to get an attorney involved because workers' comp is saying, no, we're saying we need more help. Now you have an attorney involved. You're trying to figure that piece of it out. Sometimes the attorneys are making you get expert witnesses that you have to pay for.
Wow.
So you're trying to find where that money's going to come from. All this stuff is going on my credit card at this point because remember, I wasn't working yet. I just had a couple of tax returns a year and I was like, hey, I'm just hanging out with a kid.
It's my beer money.
At some point pregnant. But, that stuff, you get to the point where you just don't care and you start giving the credit card out. Like we didn't really have credit card debt. I mean, whatever the monthly thing was. And you just start giving the credit card debt is because you're like, I just need to fix this and I can't think about that now. And that starts accumulating quite a bit, fast. And we had all the good savings. And so what I'm trying to paint a picture of is this isn't just like you sprained your wrist or sprained your ankle kind of thing like we've had in the past with his workers' comp, and it was like 3 to 6 weeks out. We're talking, at this point, we're at a year. And now we're going into the second year. We have done all the tests. Now we start treatments out of pocket. And those aren't covered, or they have huge copays. Then we're trying to find doctors to cover it, because not all doctors specialize in brain injuries. And then they have ones that don't cover Medicare, Medicaid, or commercial insurance. They're self-pay only a lot of times with brain injuries.
Wow.
And so you start chasing this ball, and all it is the credit card keeps coming out kind of thing. And now all this time he's working. So he has off duty. We're making the payments. It's fine. It will be fine. That's what you keep telling yourself. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
But it's a fine. And we have that copay. But the reality is at this point, you get to the point where once you're more than a year in, a lot of times you can't put in a supplemental claim. So all those supplemental policies went down the drain.
Okay.
We don't have workers' comp. The credit card is getting charged up. The reality is that now off duty is still happening, but it's, there's good days and bad days. You can only do so much. And you're still chasing for answers. And where that kind of rolled forward, that worked, I think it was about 3.5 years, where we made it work, we got through it, all that kind of stuff. But then I remember what happened was we had an IA interview for an incident that had occurred.
Okay.
He was completely incoherent. They wanted to drug test him on the spot. Luckily, our attorney was like, well, you remember he has a brain injury, right? And you're making him do an IA interview the morning after he just got off of day 4 of his normal shift.
Oh, wow. So exhausted, brain injury, right? Now, and stress, right? Because you're going to an IA interview. Absolutely.
And the more fatigued you get, now he had learned how to have conversations in order to make it think that the person conversing with him had forgotten they had told him the story. So when he can't lead that conversation, like an IA interview, he doesn't actually hear necessarily whole phrases. He hears words. And the more tired, the more stressed. It's just Charlie Brown teacher talking. It's probably the best way to describe it. So that's when Fit for Duty started. That, as we all know, means there is no income.
Yeah.
Coming in. I mean, you have you're burning PTO. Luckily, he always had his comp banks full, so we're burning comp banks. You're burning PTO. You're being sent up and down the flagpole to and from all the doctors. And some of the baloney, because I had to be interviewed by some of them, and some of the baloney was just like, you're kidding me, right? Like, it was unreal. And that was, the whole time in the background, we have a workers' comp claim going. That's kind of what they were like, wait a minute, you have a what? No one talks to anyone.
Wow. Yeah.
And, so what I want to paint the reality is that even if you have the savings, even if you have the supplementals and all the stuff and the good stuff that the departments offer, and I do believe they wholeheartedly offer it, there could be situations where you just don't know for a couple of years. And by then, insurance companies can say, nope, too late to file the claim, and just say no. They don't always work for everybody.
Yeah. So going through all of that in your timeline, because I know we were talking about, you were like, I have a timeline and I know we were talking about your timeline, but that timeline of injury, and now we're almost 2 years out. Is this it?
We're about 3.5 years out. So it was
3.5 years out from the injury. Wow.
Yes. And we were just in self-survival mode. So it was data injury. It was about 4 months before we thought something was happening. It was another 4 months because we're going back and forth trying to figure out, well, what's our next step? Because there's no manual for that.
Of course.
And what's our next step? And we finally realized, because workers' comp wouldn't even have a conversation with us, we were going to have to hire an attorney. So that took a few months to find somebody. And we want to go into that because everyone thinks they're going to get rich now, right? Because the attorney is getting involved. That doesn't happen.
No.
We go to that one too. Don't depend on that.
Okay.
And so now we have about a year of tests, about a year followed by, tests and treatments, all going on the credit card. About 2 years in is where we finally started trying, our doctors changed, and we had to start using doctors that weren't covered by the health insurance.
Okay.
So that's all coming out of pocket every time. And you don't even get to make the appointment until you give a credit card.
Yeah.
I can tell you
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't even want to hear from you. And they won't even put you on the books. And so we're about 2 years in, and now we're started coasting through. We have a medication that's $1,000 a month that was giving some relief for about 10 days a month from the constant pain.
Mm-hmm.
That was a new medication. Therefore, it was not covered by our insurance.
Mm-hmm.
The insurance company itself told me, you know what, try calling the drug company. Maybe they have a plan where they're trying to onboard you and they give it to you for free. Luckily, they did. But I paid for several months first out of pocket, trying to make it happen because I was like, oh, yeah, I could do that. So now we're about 3 years in. At least one of the credit cards is charged up.
That's what I was going to say. And at this point, too, your husband is also just, you're surviving on PTO.
We're just surviving.
Yeah.
Yep, we're surviving.
Yeah.
And we have a baby at home because I'm pregnant at this point. We have a toddler at home. We're now paying for nursery school out of pocket at home. Like it's all the things.
And scary. Let's just like pause for a moment and say like, this is like part of it is probably, I always consider like overfunctioning. Like you've just got to get through it, right? You just keep going and going and going.
Yeah, I'm still in that mode a little bit, but trying to work on that.
Yeah.
But
and
it's true.
It's scary, overfunctioning. You have a partner that's not the same. You're trying to figure out, how do I do all these things that I have no idea? I've never navigated it. Like you said, there's no rule book. So like the impact, the emotional impact and physical impact on you, right? And your family and the finances, right? The finances, and I totally understand the idea of like, you know what? Screw it. We'll figure it out later. And let's put it on the credit card because I want you to live and I want you to be happy and I want to figure this out. And so you make those decisions for the health of the person that you love. So, okay, I got you.
We still very much thought at this time, we didn't realize it was permanent. We still thought we could fix it. Now, the reality with brain injuries is that if you don't make improvement within the first 2 years, the first 2 years is kind of the honeymoon period to make change. It's not going to change. Well, we were a year delayed in even diagnosing,
right.
And then the next year, we're just trying to survive and understand what this thing is. There was no immediate treatment. I don't know if it would have been different, but I think it could have looked a little bit different. And there's so much unknown about brain injuries. The reality is a lot of it's experimental. I mean, it really is. And some of the treatments you hear, you're like,
she made a face. So what you couldn't see. Yeah. So what you couldn't see was Joan like shrinking back and going, what the hell? Like that face that you make, right? Because they can't see your face. But then you said like, all right, we'll try it. That sounds weird. Let's use leeches, right?
Literally, if leeches would have worked, we're like, hey, how much is it? Like,
right. I mean, leeches are used for other things, but yeah, right.
Yeah. Like literally, if it's like 30-40% possibility it'll make things better, you're like, let's try it.
Let's try it. Yeah.
Credit card, like, because he is in so much pain at this point.
Right.
It's day in and day out pain. The pain doesn't go away. Ugh. The pain, he's basically been in migraine mode since the day of the injury. So everyone who has migraines, kind of picture your really bad days. That's his day every day at 3:00.
Oh my gosh.
The medication shaves some of that off. It shaves off about 10 days of that and makes it bearable. And then you only get it once a month. You can only take it once a month. It's a shot. Right. So then you're also like looking forward at your month and trying to plan like, well, if I delay it by 2 days, like if we're going on vacation, I'll be within my window and I'll have a better vacation. Right. Or I'll have better birthday party with the kiddo. Like that's how bleeped up this is.
Yeah.
But like you really are just chasing some hope in all of it. And that's, I can't emphasize how the timelines just aren't what you think they're going to be, nor are the benefits, nor is this idea that you're going to have $1 million claim. And it's not that we wanted $1 million claim. We just wanted to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Like I want to emphasize that too. We just wanted some predictability with, are we going to have health insurance for the rest of our lives? What are we going to have income coming? Can you tell us something so we can at least plan? So if I had to go back to corporate, I could, but here's reality. I couldn't go back to corporate.
Right. Because of his status, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm within hand's reach of him. I know where he is at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has all of the air tags and trackers on him and everything and anything. I know where he is. And so the reality was you always assume you can go back to work. So I'm like, I'm a CPA. I can get a job anywhere. What if you can't work?
Right.
Well, now
because you're taking care of, right.
But I also need clients that can accept the fact that I can't be near at hand for them all the time. So they have to be somewhat independent type of self-sufficient clients, which you have to learn how to vet, because before we used to just take any client at my firm.
Okay.
Now I'm like having to vet clients and say, explain the situation and be like, I can't be your firefighter. So
yes.
I'm your support team, but just know I might be working at 10 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Because that's when you're available, because yes, I get it. So let's go through. So we're at 3.5 years. You're using that credit card. You're mounting some debt. The income's going away. Fast forward us a little bit to where things are starting to get, yeah.
We went on Fit for Duty. That took several months. Eventually, we went into ADA. That's each one of those is a 90-day period. Now, they don't have to do more than one, what I would say, like search or effort around ADA. So we did our first one. Now we're in September. ADA is over.
Okay.
Attorneys are all fighting at this point because the Fit for Duty, we of course had the attorney who was at IA is now trying to advocate for him. We still have the workers' comp claim going in the background. We've already been told long ago that you're not going to have a personal injury claim because it involved a horse. And the nature of Colorado, you assume liability with horses.
Okay.
Anytime you're on a horse, owner of horse is not at fault.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So there's some irony there. And then you keep kind of going forward. And now he's being assigned. This is the best part. He got assigned to an abandoned building with a city that still had a car wash in it. And it was abandoned due to asbestos exposure. Oh, I shit you not. Sorry. I don't mean to say on the phone. And they kept him there for 4 months. They would not give him the key because they were like, well, if he has memory issues, he's going to lose the key. So every day he had to call the building was a civilian building that supported police activity. So they had to call the gentleman who was in charge of the building. He would let him in. And the reason why he was in the building was there was a car wash that they hadn't moved to their new building yet. And so all of the police cars had to go through the building to get washed. So he would just sit there all day long waiting to open the garage door so the police cars could go and get car washed, sitting in asbestos. He's like, I would open the garage door just because I felt like I needed some fresh air. For 4 months. We haven't even gotten to that issue. Like, luckily that's not an issue as far as I know, but theoretically, he's had 4 months of known asbestos exposure.
This is okay. All right.
Yeah. So on the cupcake kind of thing. Finally, they decided to send him to the new building because they were finally closing that building. So they sent him to the new building. He basically sat at the front desk and just welcomed. All the officers would come in to get their cars serviced. He would just welcome them and say, okay, what's going on today? And then say, okay, Bob's available or Joe is available. You're going to go to Bay, blah, blah, blah. Like literally he just had to look out, see who didn't have a car in the Bay and say, okay, you're going to Bay XYZ.
Okay.
That became his new job. Loved it. Because like, at least he was around people because he is a people person. That wasn't a permanent position. At the same time, they were still trying to find a permanent position. They eventually assigned him to be a traffic ops technician, which involved because he was a DRE, he was a traffic detective. He had all of his certifications and everything because he basically led in traffic grants and tickets and all that stuff. So he traffic was his thing and DREs were his thing. So they basically, when you do this thing, you sit in a van, you're basically looking at a notepad, a computer monitor, and then you're having to look across an intersection to watch the cameras because you're basically watching the intersection camera.
Okay.
Well, now we're in May of, and I wrote it down, I think it's May of 2020. He did it for 4 days. His headaches went from horrible to, I just want to put a bullet in my head.
Yeah, I would imagine that kind of strain would not be good for his brain.
What we realized, and I went back to some of his notes, because remember, I had to pay for everything myself. I was always his care coordinator. I'd have to read reports. I didn't realize in one of the reports that the doctor wrote There's one line in the middle of all the other blurbs saying, I recommend he see a specialist in neurooptometry.
Oh.
Didn't say
okay.
who. Well, I'm going back through things and I'm like, and then at that time we were still doing some of the worker comp thing. We were paying for her expert testimony and all that stuff. And she's like, I still recommend that he go see a neurooptometrist. And I'm like, oh shit. Like he
find one of those.
He's like, well, and then he goes, well, I really can't see from like 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. It's kind of like a blind spot. Well,
all right.
What are you going to tell me? I knew he had photosensitivity.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, why were you going to tell me that? Well, I thought you knew. Like that, and there are a lot of those, right? So it turns out he had post-concussion vision syndrome.
Okay.
He had the photosensitivity. We learned from that after we went to the specialist that his craniosacral plates are displaced. His optic nerve is pushed back several millimeters. Oh God. It was like,
so you're really getting to the core of like a lot of some of these other injuries he's had because of being hit.
A whole new stream of diagnosis codes, whole new round of treatments. We're still paying for these. We don't have any.
Right.
He only lasted 4 days in the civilian position because, I mean, his head was so on fire. There was some, you know how cops are. There was something around the training. And he said, well, and he did the training, did whatever he was told to do. And he said, well, you're not going to be allowed to do this. Some supervisor told him. He's like, well, I never asked to do this. Some kind of off-duty gig thing because you're limited in what you can do. He's like, well, I never asked to do it. Now, luckily at this point, he's partially permanently disabled, which was allowing him to take the civilian position in theory.
Okay.
Well, that only lasted 4 days.
Okay.
4 days of that civilian position got him short-term disability insurance through the city, which was huge because now he went on to 2 more rounds of ADA.
Okay.
So he told the supervisor, who was a police officer, can't talk to me. I don't work for you anymore. You can, you know, and he got sent home.
Okay.
Once again, we're fit for duty. We're a little familiar with this. We end up going through 2 rounds of ADA at the same time during all of this. Now we have an ADA violation claim going.
Okay.
And we're trying to put federal charges on them.
Okay.
EEOC claim. We have the workers' comp still going. It was just insane. I think workers' comp might have been done by then because that was when they told us his brain injury is only worth $45,000 probably the night before trial.
Wait. So I think that's really important. You just like skimmed right over that, but when we're talking about finances, right? And so you just said
$45,000. They said would probably be the likely outcome of doing a jury trial, or I don't know if it's a jury trial, but of doing the workers' comp trial. $45,000. I'm like, my husband's brain's only worth $45,000.
Wow.
Like that was that
shocking because that's nothing when you consider the income potential, right?
Yep, that was December of 2019. So yes, that had already taken place. So workers' comp wasn't going to happen. We knew that. We knew that maybe we could reopen it because of this vision thing. Who knew? We knew that we were partially permanently disabled. So the union was awesome, by the way. I can't say enough for the pension board. They were so supportive. So we have that going for us. He has 4 days of the pavilion right now. That kicked into the short-term disability, which was awesome because that got us 6 months of income. Because again, remember, PTO at this time had already all paid out.
Been burned.
The first round.
Right. So getting that 6 months was gold.
It was gold.
To help because you're still in the middle of it all.
I'm about 2 years into my firm. And remember, I just said we're in 2020. This is May.
Yeah.
We
know what's going on in May of 2020. Yeah.
We're in COVID mode. 2 more rounds of ADA. That carried us eventually into February of 2021.
Okay.
When he officially got told, okay, you are done. And this person at least was way more kind. It was a new ADA person because we were in a different part of the city. And she said, it's not that you can't, and this was the biggest frustration he had during all this, is he's like, I can do anything. I used to own businesses. I did realty. I have a legal minor. He's like, I can do it. And he honestly every day was trying to work.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't care what my job is. I'll push a broom. And I remember she was like, it's not that you can't. We know you have the knowledge, but your restriction means you can only use anything with a power button for 10 out of 60 minutes every single hour. And you still need to have breaks. We can't accommodate breaks just from mental clarity, from talking. We can't accommodate that as a city.
Yeah.
And that's when he kind of was like, oh,
Mm.
now I understand. It's not that you're saying I'm not smart or I can't do things. It's that she's like, you just physically can't. That's not realistic to expect anyone to work like that.
Right.
So now we're in May of 2020. Now he's officially done. And at this point, I'm like, okay, now I should roll back, and I will here in a second. But now I'm like, okay, well, if you're officially done, let's see if we can get Social Security disability. Because remember, we have off duty. We're paying in. And I think a lot of officers forget. I know when I do tax planning and retirement planning, most of them forget about the Social Security disability or Social Security.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to count it and just make it mailbox money, but most of them forget they even have it from high school or from all those off-duty gigs. And, it adds up.
Yes.
The other thing, Social Security disability, is your kids get a benefit.
Okay.
So my kiddos, remember, right during this time, I'll tell you what, we were not saving for college. That was...
You can't.
No. And so what we've basically done is now that we had to sue for that benefit. So that lawsuit is now starting in 2020. At this time, and we did eventually win. I win my lawsuits usually pretty good. I've gotten pretty good at them.
You have a life minor in, or some kind of another degree.
Minor in legal studies. Yeah. Like,
from life experience. Yeah. Yes.
I really didn't want it, but yeah, I'm like, there's been a few times during all this, I'm telling my husband, like, it would have been cheaper for me to go to law school. Like, we're at that timeline at this point.
Yeah.
But so we also start the new claim to get fully permanently disabled because that increases our benefit.
Okay.
They were awesome again. So supportive. Everything just goes in timeline, and nothing ever took longer than it took for us to schedule it, right? They kept, it was not like this crickets thing. So we get disabled again. We get retired again. We put in for our Social Security disability. Now starts the fight of, very similar to the city. I've already done this with the workers' comp. I've already done and remember, every time we try to find an attorney, it takes a few rounds of finding an attorney that's willing to represent brain injury.
Okay.
And now we start that process. That process took 2 years. As I'm looking at my timeline, it wasn't until September we got the news. It finally went to a second appeal judge. And the second appeal judge actually read the case about a month before we were supposed to have our hearing and said, we're giving it to you. And we were like, well, what?
Wow.
It was like shocking.
Yeah.
But it was like someone actually read what we've been saying all along. It was a huge relief. But let's just say Social Security disability took 2 years, people.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in a couple of months.
Mm-mm.
Now, in the meantime, just to roll back with this, when he first got that fit for duty, that was in March of 2018. In June of 2018, we realized this was not going to go well. And we were not going back to work. We were getting those, at least I started realizing it. And what I did at that time was, one, made my business, I started looking to become full-time, as if this didn't take up time. And two, see, one of the things I already had, and I believe everything happens for a reason, was I was already a life agent. So I got my life agent license because clients were asking me what they could do for retirement and for college. And I did it as a way of just being able to refer people out, but better understand it. Well, by then clients were like, we just want you to do it. You already do my taxes. Can't we just do all this at one time every year? And I'm like, okay. And I think that all happens for a reason, because we had bought a policy, or we had bought it a year before the injury.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it just so happens that particular life company allows for claims that are outside of the 365-day window of injury.
Wow.
The living benefits is what I kicked into gear. So I placed that claim 4 years after the date of injury.
Okay.
Now, it was an uphill battle because, once again, we don't support brain injuries. Not all life companies do. It was an uphill battle. I had to get an attorney involved to start writing love letters. But we did ultimately get the payout. And we got the payout on his term policy. His term policy that we had separate of the city with the living benefits, we got the pay. But I learned a lot with that, because One, I learned that you could put in multiple claims, or you didn't have to put claims into both, because he had two policies. One was for the retirement, one was for term. We always thought he would get hit by a car. And so what I realized was that we can do multiple claims or a singular claim. You don't have to activate all of the claims. That money, the money I got from that living benefit, I was able to take and place so that essentially it's as if we got the full amount of money by the time it's invested for 10 years. And that's about when his policy would have terminated than if he had died and gotten a payout.
Oh, wow.
So the point is, one of the big things that works, and the short-term disability I believe in, we didn't have the long-term disability because I realized the waiting periods at the time. And that waiting period would have definitely, having the long-term disability would have helped during that waiting period. Because it's still an uphill battle with many of these things. But the reality is those two types of insurance and the living benefits is what really works.
Okay. We have short-term, long-term disability, short-term and long-term disability. You have a term life policy, right?
Well, not so much that it's a term life. It's having a life insurance that has living benefits. So we're talking critical and chronic, the kind of things that put you in a life wake-up call that you need to take better health, the kind of things that you might put you in a skilled nursing facility. You need to make sure, and I'll tell you, most group term policies don't have that through work. You need to have your own policy that has that. Because ultimately, you can get a payout from that. And that's the money that's going to float you for the rest. Because we didn't have a chance to plan for retirement. Like, we always were planning for retirement. We had everything saved, right? But by this time, we've cashed out our retirement to pay off those credit cards.
Right.
And having that essentially replenishes it. Knowing that you can go after things like the Social Security with disability, that's a way to get back to your kiddos and get back into that mode of saving for your kids' college and paying for things. It becomes the sum of the parts that's going to get you across it. And I think one of the other things too is, remember as I was talking, one of the things we also had was we advocated to get the free medicine. Sometimes you have to actually go to the source of the drugs to get it. Another thing that was huge in a very odd way was COVID helped us. Not being on commercial insurance and getting onto Medicare and Medicaid. Now, we got on Medicaid first because of COVID. He qualified. But then when we got Social Security with disability, I was able to get him Medicare. Medicare and Medicaid are far more willing to pay for treatments and testing. Now, you have to go through the process, but they're far more willing to pay. And far more willing to let you try other types of treatments, like well beyond anything we ever had with commercial. I was pretty shocked by that because I had a healthcare background. I worked in healthcare finance for years, and I knew that it could work, but I really just didn't think it was going to be that different. And so strangely, sometimes you have to, and I had to have him suck up some pride. He's like, I don't want to be on Medicaid. We had to suck up some pride and say, is it quality, or is it going to be the fact that we're going to, go ahead and have a better way of life, so to speak? Sorry.
Absolutely.
And I know you just left the camera because people are alerting me. No worries. But those are the kinds of things that really helped. The other thing, and this came from the pension board, and this is still in process, and we could probably do a whole thing and update, hopefully we're getting close, is we put in a PSOB claim.
Now, what's that?
Public Safety Officer Benefits. It's Department of Justice. If you've been killed on the job, or if you've had certain types of injuries, of which blunt force is one of them, and he had a blunt force brain injury, there's a lump sum opportunity for a benefit. There's also an opportunity to get all of your kids' undergraduate paid for.
Wow.
Now, that process takes 4 to 5 years. I can tell you, I started it when he did his fit for duty. Or no, 19. It wasn't 18, it was 19. I started it in summer of 19 when he officially got retired the first time. That's what let me go try. I'm in year 4. They just told me they had enough of my paperwork to submit it for review.
Wow.
4 years. They didn't look at it for the first 3, I'll tell you that. They asked for things very high level, but they didn't get into the weeds. They just got and they told me they just had enough to submit it. So that 4 to 5 year timeline is no joke.
Okay.
Hopefully, though, if we get that benefit will again be a lump sum that I can put away for him because he's going to need a lot earlier medical care. And then they'll also will hopefully have the kids' undergraduate college paid for. So that's a huge benefit as well. And I would say is if people could just kind of think about these things when it comes time to like open enrollment, that's the time to look at that short-term disability and the long-term disability. I honestly don't think that all those supplementals are worth their weight, to be honest, for the cost. I think that cost is best placed into the life policy. And here's the thing is those life policies, when designed right and with the living benefits, you can use that policy and place it in the center of things where you can use it for college. You can use it and you don't have to qualify for medical. There's other parts you can qualify for medical and get part of the death benefit. You can use it for retirement. That's tax-free. You can use it for household emergencies, new roof, hail damage, all those things. The reality is I think it's better for people to focus on taking all of those supplementals and what they're putting into their 457, which is not protected anymore in a lot of the states like Colorado because of the indemnification rules.
Okay.
And put it in a life policy because the life policy is tied to probate. People can't touch the money. So not only do you keep the money, you'll have tax-free money. And then the reality is you have a lot more flexibility. And so you're putting all the money into one pot and then you let life tell you what we got to do with it. Wow. And that's where like my business has gone. Like if you go to our website, that's if you look at our what we call the TLC method, tax minimization, life and long-term planning, civil risk awareness. That is where that interlaps, is putting one thing in place that's going to have lots of flexibility. It's not if, it's when you access it in life. And like, honestly, it's a game changer. That plus the supplementals.
And what was the TLC again? Because that was gold.
Yeah. So we did TLC, keep it really simple as an acronym. So I call it tax minimization. So that's trying to get that tax-free retirement. Life and long-term planning. So that's life, retirement planning, disability planning, college, home expense, all those good things fall into there. And then we call it civil risk awareness. Now, I'm not an attorney, but we know a lot about what things can and can't be maybe taken in a divorce or a civil lawsuit against you. As we know, if we don't have indemnification, your 457 is at risk. Not your pension, but your 457 is at risk in both of those.
Wow. Okay.
So we just try to educate around that.
Okay. Wow. All of that you just gave was amazing because there's all these, and I love that you were saying like the sum of the pieces. And so it's trying to get it all together where you can walk through it and financially recover.
Yeah. And literally that's where we're at. We've recovered, but there is no policy and procedure manual through any of this. It's as clear as mud. Most people don't know the answer. They only know maybe one minute part when you make phone calls. And it's trying to piece it together fluidly. And like literally, I was like, there's a reason why all of this happened to me. I was able to take that CPA and I happen to have that life license. I happen to have that insurance background from the healthcare and be like, all right, let's giddy up. Let's get this done. Like, and you have to push people. And I hate to say it like that, but you become this person that's constantly pushing them for answers.
Right. You're the advocate, right? Yeah.
And every time they say, well, I don't have this, they're like, oh, it's on page 15. You want me to highlight it for you? If you keep pushing, I guess the point is that it can and will work. You just have to look at it differently. It's not going to be one big, massive lawsuit that's going to come to you within a year. That does not happen, I'm afraid.
No, and it's obvious by this timeline that you've laid out. I mean, just going through the years. So TLC is a part of Fetch Your Wealth. I know Fetch Your Wealth, is that true? Because I know Fetch Your Wealth came out of this journey that you have had, and good gracious, like everything that you've learned and how amazing, I guess, in a way, that you now have this passion and this education where other people can also benefit and be prepared if something happens, but then also know how to help people kind of get out of situations in which maybe they found themselves in too because of an injury.
Exactly. So basically that's where we have to kind of shift the firm over, right? We're not just a tax firm anymore. And so Fetch Your Wealth evolved from that. Is where does all of these things interlock? we went through this long process of how do I put the story together? And really, it's not that we're a public accounting firm anymore. We do all of this. And so what we did was, it's a lot of layers, right? You heard the whole timeline. It was really complex. So it's like, how do we really just absolutely simplify this so simply? Because the reality is life insurance works, especially if you use the Index Universal Life. If it's structured right, if it's placed right, you need someone who knows what they're doing. How do we explain this story so simply as to what are the boxes it checks? What are the pillars it checks? What are the sub-pillars it checks? And that's where we literally were like, okay, well, there's the tax bucket, the life and long-term planning bucket. And oh, by the way, with all this law change that happened 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it also works with a civil risk awareness thing. So how perfect is that? You can do one thing, focus on one thing, focus on building one thing in your life. And as an officer, and even first responders here in Colorado, we have court cases where we're seeing that they are being brought up and charged. It can fit the bill for all of those things.
That would be amazing. Wow. Okay. So that is a part of what's come. And so when people meet with you, you will, or your team, y'all help us to figure out, how do we do this? How do we structure it? Whether it's retirement, whether it's preparing for injury or court, these aspects that we have to go through all together. So if people want to work with you or connect with you in some way, where do they go?
I would say go to our website, which is fetchyourwealth.com. So FETCH, your wealth.com. And there is a book an appointment, get to know us kind of link that you can go in there. Just give us your personal details. It will send an email to the team. A lot of times based on what you say in the message, like, hey, my goal is life and long-term planning or retirement, we'll send you a little mini questionnaire. It should only take you maybe 5 minutes to fill out, but it gives us a little bit of a pre-prep for what we might be going down during our meeting. And then the meetings are free. So we would just get to know each other, find out your goal. Yeah, the meetings are free. Find out what your goals are. And then we prioritize those goals. Timelines are very important. We want to know when you want to retire, how you want to retire, or if it's college, those types of things. And then we look at what you have and we try to see what we can maybe move or reposition to get to the goal.
That's amazing. So I will drop her website into the show notes. So if you are on your device, all you got to do is hit that downward arrow and it'll pull up the show notes on there. I will put some key points. There should be some key points in those notes, but also her website where you can get a hold of Joan and her team if what she's saying makes sense. It makes sense to me. I'm kind of sitting here going, ooh, maybe we need to talk. So that is just awesome. I mean, the fact that you're taking all of these different pieces and making it a part of a whole that we can go forward and go into a positive retirement or get through those bumps in the road along the way. Thank you so much, Joan. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story because I know there are other people. I actually know a couple people that went through similar situations with TBIs, and it is something that's overlooked. And I think it's important to make sure not only the story of how it impacted financially, but also the medical, the timeline, how it's just become a part of your lives and change things is something that other people need to hear. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Until next time, guys, y'all keep it Code 4 and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Don't forget to click that subscribe button on your device or get email updates by going to code4couples.com. While you're on the website, make sure you pick up my 71-page workbook and guide that goes with my book, The Essential Guide to Protecting Your Law Enforcement Relationship. Drop in the code podcast and download the workbook for free. Until next time, y'all, keep it Code 4.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about the podcast or Cyndi, check out code4couples.com. All intellectual property rights owned by CRLD2 Ventures, LLC, are protected by the firm of 9mm, 45 ACP, 5.56mm, and 12 gauge.